Mr. Chiloba, you will realize that our president has been very keen on matters labor migration and also opening up digital job opportunities for our many unemployed youths. I want you to tell this committee from your understanding or research, other than the entertainment sector, what opportunities exist in LA for our many unemployed youths that you can use your position as our Consular General to help our youth get access to those opportunities. Then number two, I've been perusing through your documents and your file that has been presented to us, and I've come across a recommendation letter written in the year 1998 by your high school principal, Kwanza Friends Secondary School, one Mr. F. Nyukuri. And just to quote in brief, there's one sentence here from Mr. Nyukuri that in view of high intelligence, Ezra is capable of doing practically everything under the sun, as he is gifted. On the whole, the young man is on the road to successful life. I call upon the authorities to be of assistance to him whenever he is in need. My question in that regard is, will you say you still possess the same attributes that Mr. F. N. Nyukuri attributed to 26 years ago? Thank you.
That's a good one. You may respond, Mr. Ezra. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think there are three questions here. Mr. Chair, on the issue of labor migration or labor mobility is an important issue. I looked at the data. Generally, if you look at labor mobility in the US, over time for the last 50 years, the numbers have been dropping because of the changes in technology, politics, and so forth. But that does not mean that there's no opportunity. The first thing perhaps we may need to consider is to leverage on programs, what we may call the low-hanging fruits. Last year, there was a center for testing our nurses, whether you're competent enough to work in the United States. That center was established in Kenya, following recommendations by our diaspora in the US. I think that is the starting point. Do we have a critical number of nurses who are qualified, who can be tested through this center for purposes of taking them to the United States, given the nature of their population aging and they need a lot more support? So there's an opportunity there. There is also an opportunity in the digital economy. Looking at at Kenya in terms of the global language, English, the language of business, there's an opportunity for actually to set up PBOs for purposes of recruiting young people to provide services or of businesses in the United States. So there is a little bit of opportunity there, and working closely also with Konza Technopolis, because they've already come up with a program of how we could harness the Silicon Savannah, for example, for purposes of providing jobs for our young people. And these are the things that I would like to explore, working with Konza Technopolis, to be able to see if we can actually translate that into results. So there's opportunity for semi-skilled workers as well. But this has to be processed properly, working closely with the Ministry of Labor, as well as the Ministry of Education, to ensure that the people we seek to provide to the world, and especially the American world, are able to provide the service they claim to provide. So the entry into the US becomes much easier, as opposed to having our young people going to the US then disappearing in the thin air. So lastly, Mr. Chair, the Honorable Member read that letter. To me, it's a very personal letter, and that's always carried with me. You might ask, what's the relevance? Because I know my story. I know how I went to school, how I failed, how I rose. And if there's any person who captures my life in advance. That is my former principal, Mr. Felix Nyukuri, many years later. So even as I go through these difficult times sometimes through my career, and I ask myself, I go back to that letter, I see a reflection of myself, and I conclude that a lot of people talk about me, but they do not know who I am. And for me, pursuit of excellence, doing the best I can, is what drives me each and every day. Thank you, Mr. Chair.